very important rule today. This is like gremlins, you know. One rule, one very important rule today. You can eat whatever you want, get wet, do whatever you want behind the scenes, you know, but everything you thought you knew about the Templars and that you've learned and that you've read, out the window today. Okay, for this 2 hours, give me the benefit of the doubt and let me show you all something, okay, completely different to what you could imagine. And it's a very old story, and it's a story that connects Flanders, Scotland, and Ireland. I'm calling it the Holy Trinity. Maybe I should call it the Unholy Trinity. We will see. I want to welcome you from wherever you've come. I want to also introduce already a good friend of mine, Guy from Flanders, film director and writer, specializing in medieval Flanders. His books, he's done one book on medieval Flanders, and he's been a great help to me in this presentation and support. I really appreciate it. And his second book, he will tell you more about it because I'm going to give him the floor afterwards, and I'm going to introduce his work, will be including the Templars in that second book.
No, the Hospital.
Oh, the Hospitallers. You're not going to talk about the Templars at all? Oh, yeah. Come on.
It's in the 15th century. They were gone already.
No, they were not gone. See.
Okay. That's okay.
Okay. So they were not gone, but we will talk about that today. We'll do a Q&A and discussion afterwards, okay? I'm going to do so that you guys understand how today is going to proceed. I'm going to keep you all chained up and imprisoned until forevermore. Not really. We're going to have a slide with just an overview of the talk, and I'm not going to be talking all the time. There's a couple of videos which I am going to show. There's a video I created today which I wasn't expecting to create, but then I had to. I was inspired last minute by Guy, so I have to say that today everything went out the window. I'm going to talk about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I'm going to try and keep it short to that. And then I will introduce Guy and his work. I've got some of your photos that you sent me and your video as well, and a lot of things, you know, so I can, you know, be sharing those when you're talking as well, okay? And then we'll do Q&A. What I've tried to do is, even though I'm going to be talking about the Flemish and Flanders most of the time, leave the part about Flanders to the end so that I can link up with you, Guy, you know. So, question I'm throwing out there for you guys to start thinking about. Why? Why am I talking about what more or less is modern Belgium today, Burgundy or Flanders with the Templars? Because they're little countries, aren't there? They're little areas, they're little regions. Excuse me for saying that, but little does not, you know, size, it's not all about size, people. You know that, okay, in life. So this is last quarter of the 13th century, where it was found. So in the Arras-Douai region in Flanders, what was Flanders at the time, okay, you can see there, and parchment. I can send these to you guys. Now, this just to show you, and this is why I'm talking about Flanders today in Burgundy, okay? And I will focus on Flanders, but I'm going to very briefly mention Burgundy because it has connections with Flanders all the time as well. So if you look at Rule 2, if you guys have your Templar rules with you, you can take them out and you can look at Rule 2, okay? And it's talking about basically the paragraph here on red that you can see here. This is the original from the Latin and the medieval rule, okay, which matches the French. And then there's an explanation here. And then this second paragraph here, which I've marked in yellow, was omitted from the Upton Ward rule. Well, part of it, half of it, okay? So in this religion, okay, so it's the first time that it's mentioning religion, and you will see throughout the rule that how it's not the Catholic religion. But in this religion, it has revitalized the order of knighthood, so on and so on. What I'm interested in here is, well, actually, I'll read the whole thing. Okay. It is revitalized this order of knighthood, which other knighthood despised the love of justice that constitutes its duties and did not do what it should do. That is to defend the poor, widows, orphans, and churches, but strove to plunder, despoil, and kill. Now, this I mentioned because this is really interesting, because the Knights Templar have a reputation for being Islamophobic, you know, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Look at what the original Templar rule says, and I will show it to you in the medieval, okay? So they are criticizing the other orders, okay, because they are not doing what they should be doing, did not do what they should, which is to defend the poor, the widows, the orphans, and the churches, but strove to plunder, despoil, and kill. They were not happy about the Crusades, okay? Now, next, the good works of Our Lady of God, in French it says Dame Dieu, okay, which is not the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is known as Notre Dame in French, okay, and Mary Magdalene is known as Sainte Marie. So the good works of Dame Dieu, the feminine side of God, which in Gnosticism is a stream of philosophy, not a religion, but it's connected to the Knights Templar, the inner circles of the Knights Templar, or the families who were at the helm of the order were all Gnostic families. And they saw God, like in Gnosticism, as both male and feminine. So the feminine aspect of God is the creation aspect, okay? And that was referred to as Dame Dieu. Right? So Our Lady of God, Dame Dieu, are with us, and our Savior Jesus Christ. Now, this is really key, and this is why I'm doing this talk today. Okay? So, the good works of Our Lady of God are with us, and our Savior Jesus Christ. Okay? And we have a semicolon there. Christ, he has sent his friends from the holy city of Jerusalem on the path to France and to Burgundy. Those who for our salvation and for spreading belief in a true faith do not cease to offer their souls to God, a pleasing sacrifice. Who is Flemish, marries David I of Scotland, who is the first monarch to give land to the Templars in Europe. Well, if we don't count Thierry of Alsace, okay? But anyway, we'll go back to Flanders. I'm going to have you a bit dizzy. Okay, so they're intermarried. They're all Flemish, helping each other. Can you see what's going on here? Flemish actors put on the thrones everywhere. Okay? And Boulogne anglicized is Boulogne in English. All right? So if you go to the charters of Calais, and there's some other manuscripts from that time period, you can see it there. And she is family of the Stuarts as well, obviously. So the Stuarts is a dynasty founded by the daughter of Robert de Bruce, Marjorie, who, like Mary of Burgundy, has an accident while pregnant on a horse, dies in childbirth, and produces the first heir of the dynasty, Robert II. And she has him with the 6th Butler of Scotland, okay? The 6th Butler of Scotland is really interesting because he was in Bannockburn, all right? So they get married in 1315. The descendants of the family of Godfrey of Bouillon, the Counts of Eustaces, okay, had ruled Scotland without interruption, supported by Flemish nobles, and of course they're Flemish, okay, well, they were Burgundian, but they were supported by Flemish nobles, who established prominent families such as Seaton, Lindsay, Comyn, Buchan, Stewart, Graham, Bruce, or the Bruce, okay, Beaton and Lisle, and many others. This is the original coat of arms of Robert de Bruce, who some scholars believe he was actually called Robert de Bruges. Robert of Bruges.
Bruges. Bruges, yeah.
Yeah. So the lion, the rampant lion azure of Louvain has ties to Flemish and Norman heritage. So when Jocelyn de Louvain marries the Percy heiress, Robert's families relinquish the Louvain lion. So Robert de Bruce changes his coat of arms when they marry. And that's when he takes out the saltire in Boulogne's colors, which are the colors of Godfrey of Bouillon, okay? You can see where the saltire of Scotland, Scotland's flag, comes from there. So, okay, so look at all they had. And this is on the research of Philip Hoge, Jan Holsten, Bernard Schotte, and Gilbert Jasson. Battle of the Golden Spurs by Gautry in 1302. Okay, this is just a depiction of it, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But they were involved in this battle, and you'll see why in a minute. And here I have a little video now to finish off, and then I'm going to give the floor to Guy after this, okay? So it is 10 minutes, more or less, or 11, okay? So relax. This will be the end of today, but it's a nice story. I've put it together the best I could, just with some images, so it's not perfect. But I want you to listen to the story, because the story also touched me, Guy. Really, really, you know. And I have names of that Guy sent to me of the Templars who died here. And this is relevant to the main preceptory of the Templars in Ypres, okay? And what happened to them, right?
Dear reader, this is the story of the murder on 23 Templars in Ypres on the 7th of May in the year of our Lord, 1307. It was written in a diary of a witness, Leven Vermeer, a Templar page that survived the massacre. The diary was found in the library of a monastery in the 17th century. Does the murder of the Ypres Templars represent French revenge for the Order's participation in the Battle of the Golden Spurs 5 years earlier? Is the attack on the Templars a conspiracy between the French and the Francophone municipal elite of Ypres? I do not know, and I leave the answer to your imagination, dear reader. Description of the murder of the former Templars in the parish of the Holy Cross Church, outside the Temple Gate in the suburb of Ypres. I, Leven Vermeer, son of Zacharias, born in Poperinge, having gone into guardianship due to my father's death, gave all my orphans' money to the Grand Master of the Templars, namely Blasius van der Matte, to become a brother in the same monastery, which I entered in my first year on the feast day of Our Lady of Light in the year 1307. There, after being a student for 3 months in my probationary period, it happened on the 7th of the month of flowering that our Grand Master celebrated his jubilee for being Grand Master for 25 years in the monastery of the Templars within Ypres, which in our company displayed many signs of joy, and a great feast was held. 2 young daughters were summoned for the occasion to bake a large amount of waffles in the evening. After I had served the whole day as an apprentice like a slave, I was not given any waffles to taste in the evening, which made me very sad. At around midnight, our brothers went to sleep, well satisfied with waffles and wine. And the 2 daughters who baked the waffles remained to sleep in our monastery in a guest room, and I was tasked with checking all the doors to see if they were properly secured before going to bed last. I was exhausted from running around all day and disheartened as I had not yet eaten any waffles. Now that I noticed my brothers were already in their first deep sleep, I tried to enjoy some waffles in the kitchen, and I indulged in them. It was now about 1:30 when I went outside again, as the weather was very beautiful. But as soon as I stepped out the door, I heard a great noise of horses near the temple gate. Looking closely, I saw that they were French cavalry. Later I learned that there were about 300 horsemen and 100 men on foot following behind the cavalry. Not knowing what this meant, I thought it might be a French raiding party coming to plunder the suburb and our monastery. So I watched carefully to see where they would go. At last I saw that all the riders were coming toward our monastery. At that moment I ran upstairs, not knowing what to do, debating whether I should raise the alarm or not, but I thought, I will not make any noise, or else the French will capture or kill me. It is best that I hide, I thought. But then another thought struck me. Before everything was plundered, I could take some money for myself. It would serve me better than the French. With this idea, I quietly went up to the treasury. The first key I found opened the door, and with 3 other keys, I unlocked a larger chest and hastily took out 2 bags of money. Meanwhile, through the glass windows, I saw all the French cavalry standing around our monastery, their swords drawn, while the foot soldiers silently broke open the gate. Startled, I ran to the guest room where 2 young women were sleeping, knowing that behind the door of that same room was a small hidden attic, which was above the chamber. Its entrance was covered with a coarse jute cloth. I lifted the jute and quietly crawled into the attic, where no light entered except through a small hole, through which I fearfully looked outside and listened. I could hear that they had already entered and were heading for the cells upstairs. Shortly afterward, I heard a terrible clamour and screams, mingled with the sounds of soldiers' swords as they mercilessly slaughtered all our religious brothers in their rooms. Among others, I heard from a certain room close to me, where Brother Michel Finquet slept, a large and strong man, that he woke up at the approaching noise and prepared to defend himself. He managed to seize the first soldier's sword as he entered, and fought so bravely that he killed 4 soldiers with it. I heard the soldier speaking French, a language I understood, but as more soldiers rushed in, he was eventually overpowered and also killed. I saw 3 different brothers jump from the windows in an attempt to escape, but as soon as they fell to the ground, they were cut down by the surrounding horsemen with their swords. Throughout our monastery, nothing could be heard but cries of murder, the clash of weapons, and the trampling of soldiers running back and forth. At last, I heard the guest room door swing open. The entrance to my hiding place was covered only by the jute cloth. Through a small gap, I could see soldiers entering the room, and I heard them say to each other, "Look, here are more Templars." The 2 young women, still in deep sleep despite all the noise, lay unaware as the soldiers approached their beds, pulled off the covers, and stabbed them repeatedly with their swords. One, named Franziska Volbrecht, was killed instantly in her sleep, but the other, Susanna Lauwers, was only half awake and not yet fatally wounded. She leapt from the bed, screaming, but I saw another soldier pierce her chest and many others stab her with their swords. I heard one of the soldiers exclaim, "Morbleu! They are just girls." Another replied, "They are their whores." At the same time, the soldiers stripped the golden rings from the fingers of the 2 murdered daughters and tore the earrings from their ears. You can imagine the terrible fear and horror I saw on their faces. I hid there like a mouse, not daring to move, afraid that they would surely kill me as well. My heart nearly failed from fear, and my entire body was drenched in sweat, trembling like a reed in a storm. After these murders, the soldiers left the guest room, leaving the blood-soaked bodies behind. From there, they continued searching all the other rooms and chambers, even up to the attic, swords in hand, checking every corner and hiding place. Once all the Templars had been mercilessly slaughtered, I heard nothing else that night but the soldiers drinking the stolen wine to wash away their murderous cruelty. They sang loudly and cheerfully, while I, with death at my lips, remained hidden in my tiny attic like a prisoner. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I saw through my hiding hole that the cavalry, who had completely surrounded our monastery so that not even a cat or dog could escape death, finally left for the city, assured that all the Templars had been slain. They left our monastery in the custody of the foot soldiers who had taken part in the gruesome massacre. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when the city gates opened, I saw an uncountable crowd of citizens coming toward the monastery, having heard of the slaughter, but all doors and gates remained locked and the guards prevented the citizens from entering. Around 10 o'clock, I heard that all my fellow brothers' bodies were being carried down and buried in the cemetery of the Holy Cross Church. However, the bodies of the 2 young women were retrieved by their parents. I remained sorrowful in my hiding place all day, overwhelmed with fear and despair, while the soldiers below continued eating and drinking. In the afternoon, some commissioners arrived to record all the goods and collect the money, except for the 2 bags I had hidden, which would later serve me well as compensation for the inheritance I had given my brother to become a Templar. By 10 o'clock that night, I finally started thinking of a way to escape my wretched hiding place and save my life through flight. 1,000 possible plans crossed my mind. Suddenly, I realized that I no longer heard any people above, and that I could enter the guest room, which, like all the others, had been carefully sealed by the commissioners. I quietly lifted the jute cloth and stepped into the room where the 2 women had slept and been murdered. I saw their clothing lying there and took one of their dresses. I removed my Templar garments and disguised myself entirely as a woman. I then tied the 2 bags of money around my waist with a rope. Taking 2 of the bed sheets, still stained with the women's blood, I cut them into strips with my knife and twisted them into a rope. I returned to my hiding place, removed 6 roof tiles and cut the wooden slats into pieces. Then I tied my makeshift rope to the beams of the roof, made the sign of the cross and said, "Lord, my fate is in your hands." I then crawled through the hole and silently lowered myself down, now around 11 o'clock at night. With great luck, I reached the ground unnoticed. I slipped through the hedge in the monastery garden and made my way to the street. From there I walked to the parish of Our Lady of Brilon in the suburbs of Ypres, where I had a cousin, a young woman who lived there with her elderly father. After knocking several times, she finally opened the door but did not recognize me as I was in women's clothing. When I told her my story, she was astonished that I was still alive, as she had heard that all the Templars had been executed by order of His Holiness Pope Clement V and King Philip the Fair of France. I remained hidden in her house for 8 days, then moved to Bruges. There I stayed until May 3rd, 1312, when a papal decree was publicly proclaimed by Pope Clement, permanently abolishing the order of the Templars. Afterward I returned to Ypres to my cousin's house. Her father had since passed away, and I married her in St. Michael's Church in the suburbs of Ypres on May 8th, 1312. 5 years and 1 month after I had fled the monastery of the former Templars. My wife, Pauliniken Vorscheppen, and I always kept secret that I had once been a Templar, fearing that harm might come to us. But I have recorded this in my journal so that future generations may know how the last Templars of Ypres were massacred, a tragedy of which I was a personal witness, having been part of the order and facing mortal danger myself. Here follow the names of the last Templars in the monastery of the same order. Living in the suburb of Ypres, the Grand Master was named Blasius van der Matte, Michiel Tinkert, Lazarus Witmelk, Pascia Rommelaer, Barnabas van Zandrijk, Robert Meirelaer, Daniel Mollink, Lauwen Soetert, Maerten van den Broeke, Dennis Korevinde, Valentijn Fallink, Guido de Blende, Jan van der Sterre, Germanus Salan, Stephen van Bavinkhove, Eloy Sevekind, Macharius de Wetten, Adolf van Neerhof, Pau de Bibuik, Petrus Bierebroek, Barnabas Ackerman, Gilles van Doedzele, Germain van der Tempel, and I, Lievinus V. Mere, together making up the number of 24 religious Templars.
Good job.
Thank you. I felt inspired. So
I have it for 3 nights of this story. It must have been.
No, I know. You were telling me about it, and I mean, there's a similar story as well, which I've come across and I've shared. But these stories are very haunting because they are true, you know, and what they endured. But the way of the Gnostics, you know, I always say that the Templars became like Christ, the Agnus Dei. Christ was also persecuted, but all they were doing, which actually they were defenders of the true faith, which had nothing to do with the Church of Rome, the names of Templars. Okay, so now I would like to give the floor to Guy. I have some slides if you want me to pull them up, you know, in your video here as well. So we met because of a common friend, a Belgian Templar, and the wine that I was doing, all those things. And of course, he's friends with Philip, who's here today, a Belgian Knight Templar who is training kids, Templar combat systems with ethics and fighting techniques. And Guy has been involved in film for a very, very long time, 20 decades. There is a little feature on Patreon, which I shared on him. He has a book already, the one that you see there. Okay, and he's been working on the research of the history of Flanders, so he's very, very knowledgeable. He understands medieval Flemish, and his parents...
I have wrote a book about Flanders because I was always curious why we were so, let me say, a little bit right-wing, most people in Flanders. And I was very curious where this is coming from. And this is how I got interested in the history of specifically Flanders in the medieval time, to understand our DNA. So, and going through all the events in history in Flanders, I realized that we were always have been needed to fight to protect our property, because it started with the Romans. We were attacked by the Romans. Later on, we had constantly the French. The French were very keen to get all the wealth in Flanders, you know. So from everywhere we had the Spaniards, sorry. It's interesting, and I'm not going over all the history of Flanders from every century, but I'm specifically with Charles the Bold. It's there over that got my interest, because there was always a clash between the Burgundians and the Flemish original aboriginals or originals, whatever. And so there was always a clash between the Burgundians. And I tried to understand what the political reason was for this, because Flanders was very wealthy, but the wealth did not came from out of the sky falling. It was very hardworking people here. They were all in the wool industry and in the cloth that we made in Bruges, in every city here in Flanders that was involved in the cloth industry. And they came from all over the world, actually, ships to buy this cloth. I don't know why, but we were actually kind of a specialist. So the wealth that came in from that, well, the Burgundians were very interested in that. And the French was always interested in that. They all wanted Flanders. Yeah, at a certain moment, you know how Philip the Good got married and this is why he inherited Flanders, let me say. So he was actually also benefiting from Flanders, from the wealth of Flanders, and he always tried to raise the taxes. That's why we had also internal wars here with the Burgundians, like the Battle of Gavern, where 30,000 people of Ghent has died because there was a conflict. He wanted to raise the salt taxes on salt that come in my book. This is Jan.
Okay.
This is Jan of Daddyzeel. He was actually the bailiff here in Flanders, and he plays a big role in my book as well, because he was actually the guard of Mary of Burgundy. When Charles the Bold died, the people of Flanders and Ghent, specifically Ghent, were feasting. They were happy that he was dead, because he was a kind of a tyrant, and he, just like his father, he demanded a lot of taxes. And yeah, everything changed because the Burgundian army was completely lost. It was shattered. So when the rumors...
But actually, the Flemish and Burgundians worked quite closely at first, you know, so it's quite interesting. I want to share that little video that you sent me that you were working on with the castle, because it's lovely. Maybe you can tell people a little about that and the pilot that you're doing. Is that okay? Yeah? Can I do that? This is really nice. You shared this with me the other day, and I want you guys to see this, okay? So here it is. Okay. So if you can tell us a little bit about this.
What we're planning for now is actually doing the first chapter of my book as a pilot. But making film is very expensive, also, you know, and I have a colleague that is interested in the same. And because actually, if before the book was actually done, I had first wrote it as a film script. So I wanted to do the first pilot of the book, the first chapter, where it all starts. And this is only this is a 3D program here, where we're trying to recreate the city. This, what you see here, is actually a copy of the Prinsenhof. Yeah, where Mario Burgundy was located in Ghent. But that is completely vanished. There's nothing left except the gate. The gate that you see here now, the small part of the gate is still in Ghent, but all the rest is completely gone. And it was surrounded by water. There are a painting and pictures of it, so I can reconstruct it. And that is what I'm trying to do here in this.